Duke Adrian Waverley stood before the assembled guests at his mother's summer garden party, casually explaining to a circle of progressive young nobles that traditional marriage had become an outdated institution constraining personal freedom, that he and his wife, Duchess Eliza, maintained their union as convenient social arrangement rather than genuine partnership, and that modern aristocrats should embrace more enlightened relationships, unburdened by antiquated expectations of fidelity or emotional commitment. Eliza overheard every word from her position behind the elaborate rose trellis, where she'd retreated to escape the oppressive afternoon heat, and she listened with ice forming in her chest as Adrian described their 5-year marriage as theatrical performance maintained for appearance's sake, while both parties pursued their actual interests independently and without obligation to inform or consider each other. The casual dismissal of their union before an audience of gossiping nobles was humiliating enough. But what truly crystallized Eliza's fury was hearing Adrian announce that he'd already discussed with his solicitors how to structure a modern marital separation that would allow him complete freedom, while maintaining the social benefits of being married to someone from her distinguished family. She stepped out from behind the trellis with deliberate composure that made several nearby guests turn to watch her approach the circle where Adrian held court. And when he noticed her presence, his expression shifted from confident lecturer to uncomfortable husband who'd apparently forgotten his wife might overhear his philosophical discourse on their marriage's worthlessness. But before we continue, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what time you saw this video. Adrian, how fascinating to hear your views on marriage, Eliza said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though I must correct one small detail in your otherwise illuminating speech. You mentioned consulting your solicitors about restructuring our arrangement. I should inform you that I've been consulting my barrister for the past 3 months, and his advice has been absolutely excellent regarding how to dissolve marriages where one party has demonstrated such thorough contempt for their vows. The garden party conversation died instantly as every guest within hearing distance turned to witness this unexpected confrontation, and Adrian's face went from uncomfortable to genuinely alarmed as he apparently recognized Eliza wasn't making empty threat, but announcing actual legal action he'd somehow failed to anticipate. Eliza, perhaps we should discuss this privately, Adrian said, attempting to regain control of a situation that had clearly escaped his management. You're obviously upset by overhearing conversation taken out of context. I'm upset by discovering my husband has been planning our separation with his solicitors while publicly describing our marriage as outdated theater, Eliza corrected, her voice remaining steady despite the rage and hurt warring inside her. But Adrian, I'm not interested in private discussion where you attempt to convince me I've misunderstood what I heard clearly. I'm informing you that divorce proceedings will be initiated this week on grounds of adultery, which my excellent barrister assures me is thoroughly documented through evidence I've been gathering since I first suspected your relationship with Lady Caroline last year. Gasps from watching guests were audible, and Adrian's mother, the Dowager Duchess Constance, pushed through the crowd with expression of horror at this public destruction of family reputation. Eliza, control yourself, Constance demanded. Whatever grievances you imagine you have with Adrian, airing them before society is absolutely unacceptable. You're creating a scandal that will damage everyone involved. Then perhaps Adrian shouldn't have created the affair that necessitates scandal, Eliza said, turning her attention to her mother-in-law. Your Grace, I've spent 5 years as model duchess managing households, hosting political events, and supporting Adrian's career while he conducted an increasingly obvious relationship with Lady Caroline. I maintained discretion and dignity while being disrespected, but overhearing Adrian dismiss our marriage as outdated arrangement, he's already planning to restructure, made clear that further patience serves no purpose. She pulled a leather document folder from her reticule, one she'd brought to the garden party specifically in case an opportunity arose to confront Adrian publicly, as he just publicly dismissed their marriage. These are sworn statements from household staff documenting Adrian's affair, correspondence between Adrian and Caroline discussing their relationship, and hotel registry showing them staying together under false names. My barrister assures me this evidence is more than sufficient for divorce on grounds of adultery, which means the marriage settlement clauses protecting my interests in such circumstances become fully enforceable. Adrian had gone very pale, apparently only now understanding that Eliza's legal preparation far exceeded his own casual discussions with solicitors about hypothetical separation. "Been spying on me," he accused, grasping at outrage as defense. "Eliza, having servants report on my activities, hearing investigators to follow me, that's a violation of trust and privacy that's absolutely unconscionable." "Unconscionable than conducting an affair while married?" Eliza asked sharply. "Adrian, you lost any claim to privacy or trust when you chose to betray our marriage vows. I simply documented that betrayal to protect myself legally when you inevitably decided our union had become too outdated to continue maintaining." Lady Caroline, who'd been standing near the refreshment table during this exchange, apparently decided discretion required her immediate departure and began moving toward the garden exit with speed that suggested guilty conscience. "Lady Caroline, please don't leave on my account," Eliza called out, her voice carrying across the now silent garden. "You're certainly welcome to remain and hear how thoroughly your affair with my husband has been documented for legal proceedings, though I imagine the scandal of being named explicitly in divorce proceedings may impact your own marriage prospects considerably." Caroline fled without responding, and Eliza turned back to Adrian and Constance with expression of calm determination that seemed to unnerve them more than anger would have. "The divorce petition will be filed Monday morning. Adrian, my barrister, will contact yours regarding settlement negotiations, though I should warn you that the marriage contract your solicitors drafted 5 years ago contains protections for me in case of proven infidelity that are considerably more generous than you apparently realize. Your casual dismissal of our marriage as outdated is about to become quite expensive." She gathered her belongings with efficient movements, preparing to leave the garden party she just transformed from social event into dramatic confrontation. "Your Grace," she said to Constance with formal courtesy, "thank you for hosting such an illuminating afternoon. Adrian's speech about outdated marriage was genuinely educational regarding his true feelings. I'm grateful I overheard it before wasting additional years in a union he considers meaningless theatrical performance." Eliza departed the garden party with her head held high, leaving behind chaos and speculation that would dominate London society for months as word spread about the Duchess, who'd publicly announced divorce proceedings after overhearing her husband dismiss their marriage. The carriage journey back to her townhouse gave Eliza time to process what she'd just done. She'd ended her marriage publicly, had exposed Adrian's affair before dozens of witnesses, and had committed to legal proceedings that would create enormous scandal regardless of how they concluded. But beneath the fear and uncertainty about her future, Eliza felt profound relief at finally taking action rather than continuing to tolerate treatment that had been slowly destroying her dignity and self-respect. Her barrister, Mr. Richard Pemberton, had been preparing for this moment since Eliza first consulted him 3 months ago after discovering unmistakable evidence of Adrian's affair. He'd advised patience while they gathered comprehensive documentation, but he'd also made clear that, when Eliza decided to proceed, the marriage contract she'd signed contained protections that would serve her well. On Monday morning, Eliza sat in Pemberton's office reviewing the divorce petition before it was formally filed with the courts. "Your Grace, I want to ensure you understand the implications of proceeding," Pemberton said seriously. "The evidence we've compiled is excellent and the marriage contract protections are favorable, but divorce proceedings will create significant scandal and social consequences regardless of legal outcome." "I understand," Eliza said. "Mr. Pemberton, I've spent 3 months weighing those consequences against the cost of remaining in a marriage where my husband conducts an affair while planning to restructure our union to grant himself complete freedom. The scandal of divorce seems preferable to the slow death of staying. Then we proceed, Pemberton said, signing the documents with flourish. Your Grace, the Duke is about to discover that dismissing marriage as outdated theater carries substantial financial and social costs when his wife possesses excellent legal counsel and thorough documentation of his infidelity. Over the following weeks, the divorce proceedings unfolded exactly as Pemberton had predicted. The evidence of Adrian's affair was irrefutable, and the marriage contract protections meant Eliza retained significant property. An income that Adrian had apparently assumed would remain his regardless of how their marriage ended. Adrian's solicitors attempted various strategies to minimize the financial impact, but Pemberton countered each move with precision that suggested he'd anticipated every argument and prepared devastating responses. The social consequences were mixed. Traditional aristocrats condemned Eliza for pursuing divorce rather than quietly tolerating her husband's infidelity as countless wives before her had done. Progressive thinkers supported her decision to leave a marriage built on deception and disrespect. But what surprised everyone was how thoroughly Eliza had prepared for independence. The properties she'd retained through divorce settlement were profitable estates she'd been quietly improving for years. The annual income she'd secured was substantial enough to support comfortable lifestyle without requiring remarriage. Most impressively, she'd spent her 5 years as Duchess building genuine expertise in estate management and investment that allowed her to maintain and grow her resources rather than merely living off settlement proceeds. 3 months after the divorce finalized, Eliza hosted a charity event at her country estate supporting women's education. Adrian attended, apparently unable to resist seeing what she'd built with properties that had once been part of the larger Waverly holdings. Transformed Ashford Park, he observed, watching guests tour the renovated manor and improved grounds. When this was part of my estates, I barely paid attention to it. Now it's clearly thriving. Because I invested time and resources in proper management, Eliza said. Adrian, you spent 5 years dismissing me as decorative wife, whose only value was managing social obligations. You never noticed that I was also quietly learning estate management, making strategic improvements, and preparing for the independence I suspected I'd eventually need. You planned this for years, Adrian said, realization dawning. The divorce, the financial preparation, all of it was calculated long before you overheard my speech at the garden party. I prepared for the possibility that our marriage would end because of your behavior, Eliza corrected. The speech just accelerated timeline I'd already established. Adrian, when I discovered your affair, I consulted an excellent barrister who advised me to document everything while quietly securing my financial future. That preparation meant when you publicly dismissed our marriage as outdated, I was ready to respond with legal action rather than merely enduring further disrespect. She gestured toward the estate grounds where her charity event was proceeding successfully. You called our marriage outdated theater. I called my barrister excellent. Those two decisions led to very different outcomes for each of us. You're facing social scandal and significant financial loss. I'm building meaningful independent life using resources I secured through thorough legal preparation. Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying Eliza with expression that might have been regret or simply reassessment. I underestimated you completely, he admitted. Eliza, I treated you as convenient social accessory while pursuing my own interests. I never imagined you possessed the strategic thinking and determination to not only leave, but to do so in a way that left you better positioned than when we married. You underestimated me because you never bothered to truly know me, Eliza said. Adrian, we were married 5 years, and you never once asked about my interests, my capabilities, or my goals beyond serving as your duchess. You assumed I was decorative and dependent because that's all you wanted to see. She turned to face him directly. That assumption cost you considerably when I proved to be neither decorative nor dependent. And Adrian, I hope that cost teaches you something valuable for your next relationship. Assuming you can find someone willing to trust you after how publicly our marriage collapsed. Adrian departed shortly after, and Eliza returned to her guests with satisfaction that came from having transformed betrayal into independence through strategic planning and excellent legal counsel. 2 years after her divorce, Eliza had become one of the most respected women in progressive social circles, known not for scandal of her ended marriage, but for successful estate management and charitable work supporting women's education and independence. She received regular proposals from various nobles and wealthy merchants who recognized her worth. But Eliza had no interest in remarriage after experiencing the pain of a union, where she'd been valued only for social utility, while her actual capabilities were dismissed or ignored. One afternoon, while reviewing quarterly accounts in her study, Eliza received an unexpected letter from Lady Caroline, who'd married a minor baron shortly after being named in Eliza's divorce proceedings, but whose marriage had apparently not brought the happiness she'd anticipated. The letter was remarkable for its honesty, Caroline acknowledging she'd been foolish to believe Adrian's promises about leaving his marriage for her, admitting the affair had been based on mutual deception, where both parties had lied about their feelings and intentions, and expressing something approaching regret for her role in destroying what she now recognized had been better marriage than she'd understood. Eliza wrote brief response acknowledging the letter but making clear she had no interest in friendship or continued communication. Caroline had made her choices, just as Adrian had made his. Eliza bore them no particular malice, but neither did she owe them forgiveness or absolution. What mattered was the life she'd built from their betrayal, the independence she'd claimed through excellent legal counsel and thorough preparation, and the self-respect she'd maintained by refusing to accept treatment that diminished her dignity. 5 years after her divorce, Eliza attended political gathering, where she encountered Adrian for the first time since their conversation at her charity event. He looked older, tired in ways that suggested the intervening years hadn't been particularly kind. "Eliza," he said quietly when their paths crossed, "I wanted to tell you that I've spent 5 years understanding exactly how foolish I was. You were a remarkable wife, and I destroyed our marriage through arrogance and selfishness." "That's genuine growth," Eliza acknowledged. "Adrian, I'm glad you've developed that understanding, even if it came far too late for our relationship. Could we ever consider rebuilding?" he asked. "Not our marriage necessarily, but perhaps friendship based on mutual respect rather than the dismissiveness I showed you before." Eliza studied her former husband, seeing regret that appeared sincere and humility that seemed real. But she also remembered the years of being undervalued, the casual cruelty of hearing him dismiss their marriage publicly, the pain of discovering his affair. "I don't think so," she said gently. "Adrian, you've changed, and I appreciate that growth, but I've also changed. I've built life I value based on independence rather than partnership. Adding you to that life in any capacity feels like inviting complications I no longer need or want." She touched his arm briefly. "Find your own path forward. Make different choices with new people. But leave me to the life I've built from the ruins of what we had. That seems fairest for both of us." Walking away from that conversation, Eliza felt profound peace about her choices. The Duke had called their marriage outdated, dismissing 5 years of her devotion as theatrical performance requiring restructuring. She'd called her barrister excellent and proceeded to dismantle their union with legal precision that protected her interests while exposing Adrian's betrayal. Those different approaches had led to vastly different outcomes. Adrian had faced scandal, financial loss, and years of apparent regret. Eliza had built independence, found meaningful work, and discovered she was far more capable than she'd ever realized while defining herself primarily as his duchess, and standing in the life she'd created through courage, strategic thinking, and excellent legal counsel. Eliza understood that sometimes the greatest success isn't saving a broken relationship, but having the intelligence to recognize when it's broken beyond repair and the strength to walk away while protecting your own interests. The Duke had dismissed their marriage as outdated. The Duchess had responded by outdating him entirely, moving forward into life where his opinions, his presence, and his belated regrets were simply irrelevant to the independence and success she'd built without him. That, she reflected, was the ultimate victory, not punishing him, but becoming so genuinely content with her own life that, whether he regretted his choices or learned from his mistakes, no longer mattered to her peace or happiness.